So, hello everyone. Good evening and welcome to RamolaD Reports, the special evening edition. I'm here this evening with a whole group of people. We are doing a roundtable podcast again this evening, welcoming Michael Large back to our fold. He's finally out of the hospital. So, I'm here with Crystal Shen, who is on the previous broadcast as well, a couple weeks ago, I think, or maybe it was a week ago. I'm here with Kim S., who is a or has been a registered nurse. She has practiced as a registered nurse, so she's very familiar with hospital procedures and so forth, and especially with the 302 hold, which we have spoken about. I'm here with Eric Jones, Courtroom Watch, who has been keeping a close eye on his case and has been leading all of the actions, asking people to participate in contacting the hospital and putting forward information, good information about Michael Large in order to get him out of there. And we're here also with Michael Large. So I'm very happy to welcome everyone to the show this evening. Thanks for being on here. And, feel free. I guess, first of all, we should say, Michael, we're so happy that you are back. And, we're anxious, I think, all of us, to hear the story of how eventually you got out, what transpired, and some of your concerns as you stayed there over 2 weeks. And I know Eric has a lot of questions and comments as well to make. And I know that as Crystal and Kim do as well. So I would just recommend that everybody just, jump in. Michael, if you wanted to start off and tell us when exactly you got out of the hospital and how, they came and gave you the news and all that, that would be great.
Okay, well, I got out of the hospital this past Wednesday, approximately noontime. My sister picked me up, and that's it. Anything more?
Yeah, well, let me just interject here. We've been saying hospital, hospital. Michael was in the hospital against his will in a psychiatric ward at the hospital as if it were a prison. So basically, Michael just got out of a psychiatric jail. I think we need to clear that up because he wasn't in the hospital for an injury and he wasn't in just any old regular hospital. He was locked up in the psych ward in the padded room, so to speak. And I just wanted to clear that up.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Eric. Thank you for bringing us to that very, very important factor and point to keep before us, because certainly I guess I was sort of presuming that people watching this show are familiar with Michael's case, but those who aren't, yes, this is something we should actually stress, because this is the subject of our conversation, really, isn't it? This whole wrongful 302 hold that the police are springing on people, taking people into the hospital against their will on an involuntary commit, and then holding them there. So Michael, in your case in particular, you had a very interesting time because you were held there for quite a long time, right?
Yes. I went in January 13th, approximately noontime. What happened was I was exercising, and I was surrounded by police, approximately a dozen of them. They were banging on my door and calling me on the phone. I didn't answer. I blocked the police because I had no idea what they wanted and didn't care. Well, a couple minutes later, or maybe, I don't know, half an hour, I heard a window break and I was exercising. I looked up, there was about a dozen police in my apartment, and they didn't really tell me much. My dog was there. Next thing you know, they had a pair of handcuffs. They handcuffed me, and they took me out to a patrol wagon. It was an SUV, black and white, by Upper Moreland Police Department. And they scrunched me in the back seat. They didn't tell me anything. Another officer walked up to the officer that was driving and said, "I need a copy of the 302. Well, unbeknownst to me, I had no idea what a 302 was. Mm-hmm. So I pleaded with the guy. I said, please. He said he was taking me to Abington Jefferson Hospital. I said, I don't want to go there. I don't have private insurance. I can't, pay for this stuff. Well, he said, too bad that this is what we do.
Did you tell them you were a veteran and I think you mentioned, did you tell them that you needed to go to the veterans insurance? I mean, did they explain why they were taking you to a hospital at all?
No, I just heard 302. I don't know what a 302 was. He said, you're not being charged with anything. I said, thank God.
But
well, we're
why?
taking it. Huh?
Isn't it extremely strange that, the police can sort of march into your apartment and pretty much arrest you, put handcuffs on you and put you in their car, but not tell you what exactly is going on?
Sure. Now, my guess is, I don't know. I'm just guessing. I don't even want to guess. But I'm guessing they had a warrant. For little old Michael Large, the big high crimes in Upper Moreland Township, PA.
Now, see, here's the thing. They didn't have a warrant, or else they would have produced it. A warrant comes with a criminal charge and an order signed by a judge. And oftentimes they're unlawful warrants that are signed by the judge's clerk, like the Stephen Dean case in Utah. But no, they didn't have a warrant, and that's why they didn't produce it. That guess, I would guess, is wrong. Otherwise, they would have said, we have a warrant. But see, what goes along with the warrant is a criminal accusation or a criminal charge, as they like to put it. Because usually you're not accused of anything. They're just coming up with a charge under admiralty or military law. And since there was no charge, no accusation, no crime committed, and no warrant, they have to come up with this bizarre piece of toilet paper called a 302. Welcome to the Soviet Union. This is what they did to the dissidents and the freedom people in the Soviet Union, like Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who wrote the book Gulag Archipelago. And they rounded up all the brilliant writers and freedom speakers and freedom screamers and people who wanted their freedom. And they arbitrarily came up with a piece of paper issued by, could be anybody, an FBI agent, someone that works for the Department of Homeland Security. I like to call it the Department of Homeland Gestapo. Could be the local police, could be a doctor, could be anyone, could be your neighbor. Who knows? They have red flag now laws in many states where somebody can anonymously, without giving their name, call and say, I think this person's mentally unstable. And the goon squad comes in, just taking orders, of course, kicks in the door and takes people's guns. And so I would guess there is no warrant. You'll never see a warrant because there was no crime committed. So that's why they have to have this thing called a 302, which is a Soviet German-style piece of paper that they come up with to lock up people who they don't like, people who are telling the truth, people who are exposing corruption, and a very disturbing pattern of single women, most of them single mothers, and veterans of the U.S. military, most of them honorably discharged, like Michael Large here on the telephone with us. That's correct. You are an honorably discharged veteran who served from, 1970 to 74, Michael?
That's correct, Eric.
Yeah, and I've noticed this in other cases that we've been working on. Tyler Whitman, Navy veteran in South Carolina, who took evidence of government military programs that were being used on him without his consent, to the Veterans Administration psychiatrist, who, after a five-minute diagnosis, made the determination that Tyler Whitman was schizophrenic, and they locked him up for a year.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's a very disturbing pattern of this taking place against single women, single mothers, and military veterans, which makes it all the more insidious and grotesque and due processless, if that's a word. The lack of due process. No grand jury indictment, no warrant, no criminal accusation, no evidence, nothing. Just a 302, and we're taking you in. We're not going to tell you why or who, and you don't need to worry about paying for it, Michael, because they're going to bill it to the taxpayer. We're going to have to pay for what happened to you, which makes it even worse. They just bill it to the general taxpayer, and people wonder why their taxes are going through the roof and they're losing their property and they can't afford to put food on the table or pay their heating bill. Is because the government's doing things like these 302s and locking people up like Michael Large to the tune of $2,000 a day at the hospital North Central in the Bronx. We found that out in the Solange Martinez case, $2,000 a day. So there's a lot of money being made and being billed to the taxpayer on incarcerating innocent people like Michael Large.
Yeah, it's incredibly disturbing. And, I'm sure Kim and Crystal have something to add over here as well. I just wanted to add one little bit that, Michael, none of us actually can get a hold of that 302 for you, but you can. I think you can call the police or go down to the Upper Moreland Township Police and ask them for a copy of the 302 that they used on you. And that is something you should indeed get, and information that I think everybody should have. You should really read out that information on the next podcast that you do with us, so that you put the information out there, let people know what they are saying and what they are writing, etc. Because literally, in this particular case at least, it appears as if the police have acted as the enemy. They have simply barged into your house and grabbed you and taken you off to the hospital on a 302 and held you there against your will. So you absolutely have a right. This is your right to ask why they did that and what they wrote down in that 302. I mean, we've talked at length about, I guess we've been speculating, right, as to why you got nabbed and taken to the hospital. It had to do with emails, etc. And we talked at length about these emails.
That is correct. I was, emailing my representative, Tom Mert,
Mm-hmm.
and he was very disturbed because I was going on Facebook and I was saying ban the electronic harassment program in Pennsylvania, but he wasn't recognizing that. So I interjected a word, ban the electronic suicide program in Pennsylvania. And that's how they got me. They thought I was, yeah, they thought I was going to do harm to him or myself.
It sounds to me like he was. You, Michael, were well within your, realm of First Amendment protected freedom of speech. I do not consider that to be evidence of you being an immediate danger to yourself or others, and that's the legal standard. You have to be they have to have evidence that you are an immediate danger to yourself or others. And what is the word suicide now illegal? As soon as you use that word, you're locked up in a psychiatric ward? That's insane. So once again, the biggest terrorist right now is the government, and doesn't seem like either political party is going to do much to fix it. It's up to us.
Yeah, it's very odd. And on the last show that we did together, we talked a little bit about this word suicide and why is it such a trigger word for the police? Why are they jumping in and immediately rushing to take action in this fashion? I mean, what really transpired after you sent emails to this representative, Tom March? Did he alert the police? And why would he alert the police? Because the word suicide was in an email that was sent to him? There are many questions to ask over here. Kim, do you have anything to say about this whole notion of the 302 holds? Because as you do know quite a bit about those, right?
Yes, I'm familiar with them. I mean, what is so upsetting is that they're not even asking, they're not even doing a proper assessment. So in other words, he used the S word, and then, it's almost as if they were wanting to take him in, and they were looking for anything they could possibly use to take him in. And then, of course, you're supposed to do a proper assessment on the person to ask them if they're having thoughts of harming themselves or others, and and talk to them. And I'm sure, I'm fairly certain, Michael, you said you weren't having those thoughts, right?
That is correct. There's a lot in between I didn't say. The day before I got out of the psych unit, or the whatever you want to say, they started making up stuff saying that I said to Representative Tom Mert that I'm coming for you. I never said that.
Wow.
He said he was... No, let me finish. He said he was worried about me doing harm to himself or his family. But in the short term, when he first got in touch with me for the one-on-one to talk to him, that was before he was, elected. That was before election time. So I believe the only time he wanted to meet me one-on-one was that he's trying to placate me to get reelected in Pennsylvania.
I see.
Then, yeah, this was a Saturday night. Now, you may not believe this, but it happened. I'm sitting here watching TV, not doing nothing, and I got a call from Representative Tom Mert, and he said that I'm killing him on Facebook, meaning that I guess I'm making people aware of this electronic harassment program, targeted individual in Pennsylvania.
Did he use the K word?
Yes, he did.
Yes, it sounds like he.
Let's take him in.
Let me finish. Upon my soul, that's what he used, and he was very aggravated that a person like me, what do you say, a person that votes or whatever,
a constituent,
that could get to him. He was really aggravated. He said he was going to get in touch. He said, this is what he said. He was all broke up. He said, the only thing you can think of, that he's going to get in touch with the DA in Montgomery County.
So he was offering help at that time.
I was thinking I was already in touch with him, and he wouldn't help me out, being a targeted individual as I am.
Oh, yeah, but when the representative calls the district attorney's office, I'll bet you dollars to donuts that the DA is the one who signed that 302.
Very interesting.
From what I understand, it was Representative Tom Mert.
Oh, he could have signed it, huh? Oh boy, okay. Let me just say for the record, yeah, we're going to destroy his political career if he's not only used the K word, you're killing him, and then he's going to sign a 302 against you because of Facebook postings. Boy,
that's correct.
What a dirt.
Well, that's what he did. He used that I was ruining his career or re-election. Because, on Facebook, they showed him doing good things with Boy Scouts in the community. But meanwhile, he's torturing Pennsylvanians with this electronic harassment program.
And sending them the bill for their own demise. Oh.
This is incredible.
I'm not sure about that.
Well, the taxpayers of Pennsylvania are paying for all this. His salary, the 302, the cops, the door kickers, the hospital. Yeah, no, he's destroying his people and making them pay for it through taxes. That's what pays for this. He doesn't write the check for your incarceration. You think he pays? You think the cops paid for their own time when they kicked in your door? No, we paid for that.
Yeah, there's something so insidious about this program. The fact that, I've spoken about this before, the Department of Defense and the Department of Justice made a plan. Janet Reno signed this, John Dutch signed this in 1994. They made a plan to share technology. And the technology that they are mentioning in this memo of understanding, they just use terms like advanced technologies that are going to be used for operations other than war and law enforcement as well. But looking at the history of the connections between the DoD and the DOJ, you understand that what they're talking about are classified non-lethal weapons. And you looking further into those connections, you begin to see that the U.S. was also working with Russia at the time to do tech transfer of psychocorrective technologies. And what these are nothing but neurotechnologies that that the Russians have been developing for decades, and that also the U.S. military has been developing very quietly, and also the CIA has been working on very quietly. But there was open discussion of this in the 90s, in the early to mid 90s. So this technology has now entered the criminal justice system. It's entered the military as well, and it's being used. But the fact that it's being used by the criminal justice system, by the DOJ, by the FBI, by law enforcement, on the streets in each of our states, that fact is being kept very quiet. Some info is coming out. They use through wall surveillance radar, things like that. That info you can find. And you hear about the X-ray vans and the gamma ray vans on the streets of New York. The NYPD was using them, etc. But for the most part, they're keeping it very secret. Now, this is like totalitarianism. It's like the Gulag Archipelago. It's all of that you mentioned earlier, Eric, because as soon as you have secret weapons being used in a populace, then you know you're not living in a democracy. It's not a free republic over here.
I'm glad you use that word republic right in conjunction with democracy, because in a democracy you can have mob rule. 51% of the government thieves can vote to steal everything from the other 49% of the producing people like you and me. All it takes is the government to get 51 or 50.5% of the people working for the government or a private contractor with the government or on the government dole, and you basically got your just all you need is a little more than half, because in a democracy, it's strictly the numbers rule. So if you got 50.001% of the people against 49.009% of the people, guess who's going to lose? The 49%ers are going to lose, and we're at the point now where this is happening. Now the Russian connection it can be exemplified in the fact that two very powerful Soviet slash East German tyrants were brought over by the Department of Homeland Security.
Yes.
Marcus Wolf.
Marcus Wolf.
From the East German Stasi. He was the director of the East German secret police, which hired Nazis right out of the Third Reich after World War II to fill their ranks. And Yevgeny Primakov, top advisor to the Department of Homeland Security right after 9/11, and the Patriot Act was passed, and everybody was on this, terrorism kick. They brought over the chief Russian, the chief Soviet, Yevgeny Primakov, who was the director of the Soviet KGB, and he assisted, who was the first director? Was it Chernov or Napolitano, in establishing the Tom Ridge, the Department of Homeland Gestapo, and all the programs like the NDAA, which is the National Defense Authorization Act, to quote unquote legalize everything that they're doing to Michael Large, who's on the phone with us tonight. We're so glad to have him out. Let's not forget that the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, is nothing, and the Patriot Act were nothing more than an extension and a modernization of the Strom-Thurmond National Defense Act of 1961, which was codified under U.S. Chapter 10, the title Chapter 10 of the U.S. Code. I think it's 2853, which says the government is allowed, quote unquote, allowed in their mind, of course, morally not, but they think it's now legalized because they passed a piece of toilet paper with 500 people in Congress that says they can experiment, use as guinea pigs, American people, American citizens, for whatever they want to do, whether it's a military weapons test, a biological weapons test, a psychological operation, whatever they want to do, they can do it to Americans. Now, they can't get away with doing it to foreigners, the French or the South Africans or the Russians or the Chinese, because that would be considered an act of war. But they can pass a piece of toilet paper, call it a statute, call it law, and get away with whatever they want to do to us. And of course, the witches' court signs on to all of it. We don't have any remedy or recourse. Even up to the Supreme Court is probably the worst of it all. So back to you, Ramola.
Well, I was just going to say, I think Crystal should jump in at this point, because last time we were talking, Crystal, you were talking about all the other laws, including the NDAA, right? And also the 5240.1, is it? The Military Experimentation Directive? And
I think it's, yeah, was that, what I was citing was the Chapter 10, Section 2853. Did Heidi have something else to offer? There's a slew of them. There's several different statutes and codes that have been passed at the federal level that legally enable, and I hate to use these words because it's not right what they're doing, and it's not morally right. It's not lawful under the Constitution, but legally they think that they can do whatever they want if they get enough attorneys in Congress to pass it. Don't forget, almost everybody who holds office, whether it's congressional, state legislature, county legislature, your mayor, it's usually an attorney or an ex-military person. And I'm not disparaging the military, but the military has both good and bad people in it. And they seem to find the bad ones to occupy elected office if they can't find an attorney to do it. That's why the two-party system is so dangerous.
Yes, absolutely. So, and it's the bad ones are the ones at the top who actually establish these kinds of horrific satanic regulations, permitting themselves, self-permitting, is the right word for it, as you said,
Yeah.
self-permitting themselves to experiment on, large bodies of different groups of people, anybody they like, any demographic that they like. And it certainly seems to me, I mean, this is astonishing, isn't it? The military does not protect its own. People who are veterans and people who are enrolled military are very susceptible and vulnerable to these kinds of abuses.
Yeah, and the people just eat it up. I got to give Dane Wigington, and he's the founder of geoengineeringwatch.org. I want to give his outfit a plug because I've been following his work very closely, and hopefully future broadcasts with us from Ola, we can address the geoengineering crisis because it is literally leading to the collapse of the ecosystem. It's causing global warming due to what they're climate engineering, and it's not SUVs or cows expelling gas or human activity. It's human activity by the military in what's called solar radiation management, stratospheric aerosol geoengineering, and ice nucleation for weather modification. And Dane gave a really interesting quote in his geoengineering news alert broadcast. There's like 180 of them on YouTube. People can go look it up, and I suggest they do. They're phenomenal information. He lays out just proof, chapter and verse, of the climate engineering disaster that we're experiencing. And Dane gave it a quote from H.L. Mencken, and hopefully I won't butcher it. I'm going to take it slow, but it said basically the men that people admire most extravagantly are the ones who lie to them, and the men and women that people detest most violently are the ones who tell them the truth. So the truth tellers usually get stoned and executed, i.e., the Lord and Savior, and the liars and deceivers are the ones who get promoted to the highest offices in the land.
Absolutely. The deceivers, right? And the ones, then they'd never stop telling lies such that they begin to convert whole masses of people into believing them.
Yeah, well, we're talking about this, since we use the word deceiver and the word mass, I highly recommend that people go online and witness the St. Peter's Basilica. That's the church at the Vatican in Rome. And Ramola saw this herself. I don't know if she even believed me until she heard it and saw it with her own eyes, but there's video and audio of the high priest and all the subsequent lower priests, and the Pope is there, and the cardinals and the archbishops are all there, and they're singing in Latin a mass to Lucifer, the fallen angel, who we would call the devil or Satan, and it's really bad. So when I had somebody who's a high-level insider tell me these people are Luciferians all along the line, from your local, state, right up to the federal and the highest office in the land, I was kind of skeptical because I thought that maybe it was a rabbit hole that was a little too deep, but it's really true. There's some very dark forces in very powerful positions that are legitimizing and legalizing the treatment of people like Michael Large and so many others who are locked up. There are, I would dare to say, hundreds of thousands for sure, and possibly, scary enough, maybe millions of people just in this country who are locked up in either prisons or psychiatric wards for their political beliefs or their political activities, nonviolent ones.
And it's not really spoken about in media because we don't have a media that covers this kind of thing, right? I think there may be here and there are groups that do this kind of coverage, but really people don't know what's going on. And this particular subject that we are looking at, the 302 hold, using this particular mechanism to remove people's rights, basic human rights, remove their civil rights and liberties, and just incarcerate them because of them exercising things like freedom of speech, freedom of expression.
Simple thing.
Yeah.
You're right. And it's when I watch some other people in the media, obviously we know the prostitute media like CNN and ABC and Fox News and the big names, are going to either lie to us by lies of commission, meaning all out lies, or lies of omission, meaning not telling us the full truth. And then along the way, there are people who are kind of okay. They're conservative, they're pro-Second Amendment gun rights, and they're pro-freedom of speech, and they want the Constitution reinstated. And they realize that both political parties are working for the bankers and higher powers than they. But they won't touch, they won't really go all the way. They're stopping at kind of, well, Congress is doing this, and this Supreme Court decision said that, and they refuse to hear this case, and Supreme Court Justice so-and-so is, Kavanaugh is betraying, is now turning out to be a liar. Well, we knew that. I mean, anybody who didn't know that from the beginning is a fool. But, they kind of stop there. They won't get really into the deep, dark corners of the psychiatric wards filled with political prisoners, i.e. the Soviet Union, i.e. China. You might be on mute, Ramola.
What I thought was I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
What I think is disturbing as well. Okay. Well, first of all, that he basically put the order out for Michael to be picked up, and then of course, he had his other people cohorts that followed, but the doctors and the facility had somebody come in and they were told something and they did not use their medical judgment, and they went along with everything and with the whole game basically, and that's very upsetting.
Yeah, you touched on that before. I wanted to jump in before when you were talking about it. Where was the psychiatric evaluation before they kicked in his door, broke his window, terrorized him and his dog, handcuffed him, crammed him, stuffed him into the back of the SUV, took him to the psychiatric? I mean, couldn't there be a little, where was the psychiatric evaluation before that? There had to be some evidence. You don't just go pick up somebody because they used a word that you don't like, or because. And it goes back to this. There's a very interesting word being bandied about the legal establishment. In other words, the judges, the district attorneys, the police are all using this word, and you'll hear it if you look for it. If you put your ear out for it, you'll hear it, see it. They're using the word risk. There's so-and-so is at risk for this. This group of the population is at risk for that behavior. Such and such is at risk for this, at risk for that. And they're employing the word risk as if it were a fact, as if it were a charge, as if it were a criminal act or an accusation, and saying, well, there's a risk out there. There's a potentiality. There's a possibility. As Dane Wigington said, that there maybe, possibly could be something that happens, and they're using that as if it were evidence of to take action.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Can I interject something?
Please.
When I was in the psycho ward, I seen some paperwork. It labeled me as being psychotic, schizophrenic, and then any possible words you can imagine.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know how whoever signed off on it.
Yeah, I don't know how they came up with that. You sound pretty normal to me. You sound like a regular guy who got terrorized. And once again, where's the evidence of this? I mean, and
where's
by the way,
evidence? And when did they even do a psych evaluation? See, this is the question I was trying to ask you earlier, Michael. Did they actually sit you down and say, we're going to do a psych evaluation and we are going to, try to understand what's going on? And did they do that at any point?
No, I was scared to death to tell them my symptoms of being a TI. I thought maybe they could, keep me longer. So I just said I was an advocate for the electronic harassment program.
Perfect play.
But
Perfect. Yeah, that was great.
Listen to this. This is really funny. They were going to transfer me to a state hospital, which I understand they do electronic shock and all that stuff.
Norristown Mental Hospital.
Actually,
the first
medieval.
The first week they kept me under the premise because I had high blood pressure. Well, they came to take me to the state hospital, but I had high blood pressure. So they took me out of the ambulance and took me back to my room. They said, you know, I was a medical, I don't know what. They couldn't evaluate. Yeah.
Once again, you're at risk. I have high blood pressure too if I was just yanked out of my home by the goon squad on something called a 302 and locked up in a room with no privileges to use the phone. They didn't even give you a HIPAA form. You had trouble getting a Bible, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, even with a psychiatric evaluation, that's still somebody's opinion. That could be extremely flawed. It could be prejudicial. We had, no offense, folks, but we had a case where, you know, there was for Solange Martinez, who's a Christian, they had a Muslim doctor doing the psych eval on her. Now, I have nothing against Christians or Muslims, but it's not appropriate necessarily to have somebody from one faith whose belief system is firmly established in a set of paradigms and whatever, and making the determination on somebody else's psychiatric condition who is a completely different faith. You know, a Muslim person may think that a Christian is nuts because they think Jesus is the Son of God. A Christian may think a Muslim person is nuts because they believe in Muhammad, who was having sex with a little girl when she was 9. I mean, there's cases to be made that, you know, so it's not, you know, once again, it's opinion, and that's why many psychiatrists are not allowed to testify in court. Once again, kind of like this with the Supreme Witches Court, they only issue opinions. The Supreme Court opinions, the psychiatrist opinion. They're trying to get out of evidence, which, well, you know, they would have to have something that showed you committed a crime, and get into, hey, someone's opinion. Well, this person's a professional psychobabbler, so their opinion now holds water in court and can destroy someone's life. That should scare everybody.
Yes, absolutely. You know, I sent around an article a little bit earlier today. It's a Police One article, and it's very interesting. I don't know if anyone had a chance to look at it, but it's from the Force Science Institute, which apparently is like a legal kind of association that deals with police affairs. And they were basically writing up information for the police on how to deal with calls regarding suicide. Now, this is not about 302 holds. It's not about involuntary commits. It's about suicide calls. If a member of the family calls and says, you know, somebody is suicidal, and then the police rush in supposedly to help, how they behave and what they do, etc. So, as we know in Michael's case, on a 302 hold, because the word suicide was mentioned in an email to a state representative, the police were called in by somebody and they charged in and they engaged in an act of violence and dragged him off. Now, in this article, one of the things, a couple of the things really stood out to me, but one of the things that stood out was that we're hearing cases, and this is the, you know, the legal beagles over at these this Police Analysis Institute, saying we're hearing cases about the police rushing in to save somebody from killing themselves, but ending up killing them instead.
Well, beautiful. Yeah, isn't that lovely? Do you want to talk about, yeah, the problem, reaction, solution? It's called the Hegelian dialectic. It's based on a philosopher named Hegel, Hegel, I believe is how you spell his name. And he's a philosopher of, I believe, from the 1700s, who said, basically his premise was, you create a problem, offer the solution, and then ride in as the savior to execute that solution. So in other words, wow, we're gonna fix a problem. They're supposedly gonna fix a problem, and they end up creating another one through their solution and control the whole situation, both sides along the way. The Hegelian dialectic is what it's called, and that kind of indicates what these police are doing. I mean, you want to talk about making a problem worse, or creating a problem where there was none to begin with.
Exactly, and clearly, you know, the police do need re-education on a situation like this, if that's what they're doing. And it goes back to that issue of risk that you talked about, because this issue of risk, I think, in the criminal justice system is a big, big word. It's a trigger word for them, and they use it constantly. Even in this article, finally, you know, there is number 4 in this little article. Let me just read this because this is so interesting. Number 4 is, an exhortation to these guys to stay on the legal side of things, and it's titled "Avoid State-Created Danger." Throughout a suicidal subject call, officers should remain aware of three questions this author recommends. Who is at risk? Who is causing that risk? What is necessary to eliminate or reduce that risk? And to protect yourself legally, he says, you don't want to bring risk to the person in crisis unless that person is bringing risk to another person or the police. And you want
Correct. And look what's happening. The person at risk is the person who the police are coming after. It's the whole thing is kind of upside down. Read that list again, Ramola. What were the qualifications?
The three things. Now, remember that this is not what the police are really doing. This is what this guy is recommending that the police do. Ask these questions. Who is at risk? Who is causing that risk? What is necessary to eliminate or reduce that risk? And
okay, so I would submit the homeowner is at risk. The police are causing the risk. And what was the third one?
What is necessary to eliminate or reduce that risk?
Okay, take the courts back to common law, and no victim, no crime. Period. It's that simple. That's what our Constitution is based on. And our Constitution, the federal Constitution, or the national Constitution, the country's Constitution, the real organic Constitution, it uses the word common law in it. And under common law, if there's no victim, there's no crime. Forget all these statutory violations like your shoes were the wrong color, or your hair's not short enough, or you didn't obey the judge's order to come into court on this day, or you didn't drive, at this speed instead of that speed, even though you're not hurting anybody or causing any immediate danger. You were driving 47 and a 35, and so now, somebody else might be at risk. Once again, the police are writing in report. I got this from a retired parole officer. Where on the report it says victim, and the police is filling out a report for somebody who got arrested, and it says victim, they write in the victim blank right next to it, society. Society is the victim. Society can't be a victim. The police are actually, this guy who used to work for the state parole agency told me, he said, I had a real problem with that. He said, the police are writing society in the blank next to where it says victim. You're supposed to write the person's name in there who was victimized by the act. But guess what? The system can't incarcerate people and make a whole bunch of money if they have to have a victim for every crime. You'd find out that, guess what? All of a sudden there really is no crime out there. If you take the premise that if there's no victim, no crime, then you're going to find crime goes down to almost zero, because once again, who was victimized by the gentleman who lived in the next town over from me, trying to avoid a deer at night and running into a guardrail? The police showed up ex post facto and said, well, you could have been drinking. We're going to automatically suspend your license for 2 weeks on the spot. Right there, they took his license. He wasn't drunk. They didn't have any evidence he was drinking. He refused to take the blood test. And they said, well, you're going to refuse to take the blood test? We're going to, because he doesn't want a needle being stuck in his arm. I don't blame him. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't impaired. He wasn't speeding. He wasn't driving recklessly. The deer jumped out in the road, which they're all over the place up here. He runs into the guardrail trying to avoid the deer. His bumper gets hung up on the guardrail, so he couldn't leave. And the insurance company had no problem with it. They said, no problem, we'll cover it and pay for the guardrail. So the county was covered. It wasn't going to cost them any money. The taxpayer wasn't victimized. The guardrail wasn't a victim. The deer wasn't a victim. He missed the deer. The trooper who showed up ex post facto after the fact, he wasn't a victim. What did this guy do to the troop? Nobody was victimized. But yet they took his license on the spot, dragged him through the court, charged him thousands of dollars to drag him through the witches' court here in Allegheny County, New York. It was grotesque.
You have to ask, is this all about money? That's also so problematic. There's one thing I just wanted to say as the end of this section on this risk thing, avoiding state-created danger, the injunction that this writer gives to the police reading this newsletter is, if your actions unjustifiably worsen the situation, resulting in harm to the subject, you may be liable for what's called a state-created danger. And in court, this could result in a loss of qualified immunity from litigation. And the panelists cite case law where this has occurred. Now, you see, this brings up this issue of police immunity, qualified immunity from litigation. And perhaps that is part of this whole issue over here. How the police are protected. They are almost a kind of a protected species, but it seems like they certainly run around creating these state created dangers, not just in situations where somebody, on a real suicide call, but in cases like this on these 302 holds, but which are really not suicide calls at all. So although somebody could, and we've talked about how people can report somebody else. You mentioned that earlier, right, Eric? Anybody could report anybody, and it could become a family member, even saying, wrongfully stating this person, may be suicidal or a danger to themselves. And that
Yep.
actually is related to targeting, by the way. At that point, we start talking about targeting because,
Well, once again, you have the East German model under Soviet occupation in East Germany. The Stasi had everybody narking on their neighbor, brother narking on sister, mother tattletaling on their own children. I mean, employees tattletaling on their bosses, bosses telling on their employees. I mean, it became a giant to where all they, and this is how genocides and totalitarian dictatorships are created. Just get people turned against each other, everybody telling on each other, whether it's well-intentioned or just maybe a grudge. Somebody may not like somebody else, and they say, hey, I saw him, he's got a gun. I saw him, he was threatening somebody. He looked at me the wrong way. I mean, where does it end? And this is why the Department of Homeland Gestapo here in our country was very happy to bring over Yevgeny Primakov from the Soviet Union, KGB, and Marcus Wolf, head of the East German Stasi, to establish the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, which is now being used against patriots.
And that's what's going on currently. This sort of the Stasi mechanism has been unleashed in the population, but it's also in conjunction with these community policing programs, these crime prevention programs, countering violent extremism programs. So they have created lies on paper, and they've created lies in action, and they started to corral communities to act against certain people. Scapegoating targets is what they are doing.
You just cited some excellent examples. Let me add to that list. See something, say something. Janet Napolitano, the Department of Homeland Gestapo director, on a big screen in Walmart, as if it was Orwell's 1984, saying, if you see something, say something. We might all be at risk if you don't tattletale on something. If you see something, say something. See something, say something. All right, let's use it against them. From now on, when we see something corrupt that the police are doing, say something. I don't care if it's a traffic ticket. No victim, no crime. We're still under our Constitution and under common law. No matter what the Congress says, nothing's been repealed. We still have our. This is another point I'd like to make. We can never have our rights taken. They can only be violated. Don't ever let somebody tell you, "Hey, we're losing our rights, man. We're losing our rights. We're losing." You're not losing anything. As long as you're drawing air through your lungs, as long as you're breathing and you're alive, you have your rights. It's a matter of who is violating them and how they're doing it. So the onus
and exercising them. Exercise your rights.
Correct. Absolutely. And part of that exercise of rights is what people did to help free Michael Larch. He could have got 20-something days in that psychiatric hospital or longer. He was out in 5. And Solange Martinez, who we assisted in the Bronx, very similar situation, patriotic Christian woman, got locked up on a psychiatric hold, bogusly diagnosed as schizophrenic, forcibly medicated, a 60-year incarceration petition. We got her out in 3 weeks. Anna Taylor was told by the doctor when she exposed the court corruption in Connecticut, and they arrested her the next day at the courthouse, took her to the psychiatric institution, perfectly normal woman, and she was told she was going to be locked up. The doctor said, Anna, we're going to sign you in for life. We got her out in 3 days. And so, and because of all the people out there listening to this podcast and all the people involved with the Courtroom Watch program, the Courtroom Observers, all the single parents helping singleparents.org, we have got quite a membership there. All the people who called and unified their voice is what's allowing all these people to go free, because the system will always give in if there's enough public pressure. It's just a matter of time. But there has to be a unified voice. There has to be the phone calls, the pressure. And the pressure has to be put where it needs to be, not only on the chief of police, who are the executioners, but not only on the judge, who is usually on the side of the district attorney in the system. They're usually not looking for justice; they're looking for money. And of course, and I always bring up the Archbishop because he's the big cheese behind all of these different governmental entities. The Archbishop has more power than people like to think, and people can poo-poo the idea and roll their eyes and say all they want. But I'm telling you right now, we're bad. We're at about 9.5 out of 10 success rate, and that's unheard of. And it's not because of me, or it's because of all of us putting the pressure on the Archbishop, putting the pressure where it really needs to be. So that was a big factor in this case and many others. Show me another group that's got 9.5 out of 10 success rate for getting people out of the psychiatric ward or out of prison. Very few. So don't tell me, the Archbishop has nothing to do with it, or what are you talking about that for? Trust me, I've done, and I'm gonna take 2 minutes here, Ramola, and back up my case with some facts, and then I'll turn it back over to you. But
Okay.
I walked, and I had to see for myself if the Vicar General, who is basically the Vatican tax collector under the Archbishop, look it up online. Every city has a Vicar General and an Archbishop. And so I figured I'd go into the courts and see what was going on. And there it was. For example, I'll use this one because it was crystal clear. Federal Disability Claims Court. A gentleman who I know personally, 6 years. He had 17 documented disabilities from Strong Memorial Hospital. It took him 6 years. He hired 2 different attorneys to help him get his disability settlement. After 6 years of going through the court, the judge finally granted his settlement. This is a Federal Disability Claims Court judge in upstate New York. Granted the settlement and immediately turned the money over to Catholic Family Center as what's called the payee. Even though this guy was perfectly well, he was physically disabled. He wasn't incapable of taking care of his own money. But what did the court do? It didn't give him the money. It said, "We're going to grant you your settlement, sir, but we're going to turn the money over to the Vicar General and the Archbishop, one of their agencies, Catholic Family Center, and they're going to dole it out to you as they see fit." Don't tell me the Archbishop and the Vicar General don't have power when they can get the Federal Disability Claims Court to turn somebody's Social Security settlement over to them immediately upon adjudication. Want me to give you another one? How about the woman who called me?
Amazing. That's
I
absolutely
blew my mind,
astonishing.
and it proof is in the pudding. I had another woman call me and say, "They're taking my child. I got to go into court today." And I said, "Well, you should have called me a little sooner." And she said, "I didn't have enough. I don't know. She didn't have enough toilet paper in the house, and CPS, took the kids." It turned out the head of the CPS in that county was married to the chief of police, so she'd bring the case to her husband, and then they take it into court under Judge George Bartlett III, Freemason. And guess what? Guess who he gave took the children from the mother, and guess who he gave the children to for quote examination? Catholic Charities. The largest pedophile network in the world gets children to quote unquote examine the children, and that doesn't make you sick to your stomach. Nothing will. Guess who runs Catholic Charities? Like Catholic Family Center, the Vicar General and the Archbishop. Hello. So don't give me this garbage. They don't have any power of the courts. And I'm not yelling at anybody on this panel. I'm yelling at people out there who have gotten a little grief from, who kind of say, no, it's not that. We need to go talk to the Archbishop for it. We need to just go to the hospital and get them to let him out. That don't work for Jack Dookie. You got to go to the big cheese. Everything comes from the top down. If you're not going to the president, if you're not going to the governor, if you're not going to the Archbishop, if you're not going to the top, you're not going to get results. You're not going to get 9 out of 10 success rate like we have here.
This is very interesting, Eric. So basically you're saying that in this particular, the second case that you mentioned, certainly you're talking about the literally hitting the mother lode of corruption here, the understructure of corruption. You literally, there are connections between, the child protection services and the pedophile network, as we are incessantly seeing,
I forgot.
in
One
news
more I want to
stories
add
around the
there.
world.
The public administrator in upstate New York, and the public administrator is the guy who the surrogate court gives people's estates to. That's when somebody dies and they don't have a will, their estate goes into what's called testate. And the surrogate court takes over the case, and guess what attorney that they appoint over that estate and the liquidation of all the assets, taking a big chunk out for themselves? Frank Evangelo, educated at Catholic University of America, intimately related to the Vicar General and the Archbishop. And he's getting all the estates, including Max Farish, one of the few billionaires who was in Rochester. I think he was the first billionaire in Rochester, New York. His fork, he died. The surrogate court took over the estate. The 4 children should have got about $500 million each. The attorneys came in and cleaned it all out and left the 4 children nothing, not even a house to live in.
Oh my God.
Okay. And Fat Frank Evangelo, the public administrator, educated at Catholic University of America, intimately related to the vicars and the bishops. Don't give me this stuff. The archbishop is not the guy to call.
That's very interesting, Eric. And I guess this is part of what I wanted to also find out, to talk a little bit about, because all of us took some actions. All of us, on this panel certainly took actions. Many people who heard our podcast took actions. People called into the hospital. People called the CEO of the hospital. People called the Archbishop of Philadelphia. People, I think, were also asked to call the police. Now, I did not personally call the police, but maybe somebody did. Called the, chief of police at Upper Moreland to find out why they had done this, etc. Now, I actually still want to write about this, and I will speak to Michael further to get more detail. But it certainly seems like these calls seem to have an effect, right? All of the calls and letters, many of us wrote letters and we faxed letters to these people.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah, and I'll publish anybody's letters if they wish to give it to me. I'll put it on my website and, in a compendium.
That's a great idea.
Just to show that this is what had an effect, and to tell people, as you are telling people right now, Eric, that it is important for all of us, just normal people living in the community, hearing about stories like this, to simply act on our consciences and our feelings of fellow humanity for each other, and make a call, make a phone call, write a letter, because these things absolutely have an effect. Do you remember, Michael, there was a period when you were sitting in the hospital and you weren't in communication with any of us. We all got very worried during that time period. We were trying so much to reach you. What was going through your mind at the time?
Well, I can't really say because I was scared to death to say anything, thinking that they were going to transfer me to that state hospital in Norristown.
Oh, right. So you were
Well, the first time they took me down to the ambulance, and the ambulance guy took my, my vitals, and my blood pressure was too high. They said the judge don't want to see me because, my blood pressure was too high. He didn't really explain it. So they took me back to my room, and they came the next night. And the next night, I made it out to the hallway, and they took my vitals again. And they said my blood pressure was too high. And they said the judge in Norristown didn't want to see me. Thank God, I don't want to go there anyway, because it was a state hospital. So they took me back, and I don't know if it was the next night or the night after. It was a Saturday night. This big guy with a badge showed up. I guess he was going to transfer me to that hospital again. When they took my vitals again, and they said my blood pressure was too high. They can't transfer me. And I'm thinking, geez, this is great. So, yeah, I don't want to go to Norristown State Hospital. I heard they do electric shock there and everything.
Oh,
yeah. It was a blessing in disguise, supposedly. Now, in the afterthought, maybe they did that just for design. Because a nurse told me afterwards that when I went into the psych unit, they don't transfer you to the Norristown State Hospital. I'm very sensitive to these things. That's why I thought it was done by design.
Yeah, I think they could care less. Yeah. I think they could care less about your welfare and your blood pressure being high. I think they wanted to get, and I'm going to back this up with some facts here. I think they wanted to get some medication into you under the disguise of blood pressure medication that was actually something else. And with that, I'd like to bring in Crystal and to verify, or maybe Ramola, which one of you ladies knows. We have determined that the medication that they were
Kim
giving
does.
you.
Kim and Crystal both have a medical and nursing background.
Yeah, supposedly under the disguise of blood pressure lowering medication. What were they actually giving him, ladies?
Well, we don't
Zyprexa is an antipsychotic, and it is for schizophrenia and bipolar.
What's it called?
So the trade name is, or the brand name is Zyprexa. Olanzapine, I believe, is the generic. So, and I believe, I mean, if I haven't had a chance to look at the medical record, but that's what it appears that the medication was. Yes.
I thought that's what he got on when he was done with the blood pressure medication.
Right. That's what we're saying. They claimed to be giving him a blood pressure medication, which turned out to be actually, in reality, an antipsychotic medication. And antipsychotic medications don't do your mind any good. They can bring on bouts of suicide, actual, real, true suicidal thoughts. Is that not true?
Wait, excuse me. Did you say that it turned out? Is this verified fact that they were not giving him clonidine and instead they were giving him Zyprexa? Because I was under the understanding that he was on the clonidine until they, said that they lowered it, and then they started the 302 clock, and then he was on the Zyprexa.
Do you know what it was, Michael? Do you remember all these drugs?
Well, yes, I do, but I was sort of confused about all these drugs.
Yeah.
They had, I told them I didn't want olanzapine because I was on it before and I got a side effect.
Yeah, you told me they were going to try to change Xanax to olanzapine, right? Or was it Zyprexa to olanzapine? What was that?
Yeah, Xanax, Xanax is a benzodine. They didn't want me to have that.
Benzodiazepine.
Yes.
The benzodiazepine.
Yeah, I told them I didn't want olanzapine, but like 3 nights later, they said I've been given olanzapine. It really mixed me up, everybody. But
right, so there you go. They were sneaking in medication other than blood pressure medication. So there it is.
Was he?
Yeah, that was.
Well, they weren't right, and what they were giving him, they should give you the fact sheets they have for the medications. And so he could have be informed on what he was taking and whether he wanted to take it or not. But that's not that was the whole point. The whole point was that they wanted to get a antipsychotic, a psychotropic in him, so they could bill and show active treatment. They cannot bill if they're not having active treatment.
I think that's part of it, and I think also once you have somebody on that antipsychotic drug, due to the side effects and the mind-altering state that it will put you in, they can start claiming that he is mentally ill when he's not. In other words, many people that you see, Solange Martinez confirmed that. She said many of these people that were in the psych ward with her were not really mentally ill, but once they began the medication, the quote, antipsychotic medication, they started walking around in circles and talking to themselves and actually appeared to be mentally ill. So they can create that self-fulfilling prophecy, that Hegelian dialectic, create the problem, offer the solution, and then perpetuate the problem through more forced medication.
Possibly, yeah. I know that one thing is that, and I mean, if you're taking the medication, that's what they want. They want you on the medication to go with the diagnosis. So they can't show you as being like if you don't take the medication at all and you're acting fine at discharge, that doesn't support that you have a diagnosis. So they want everything to flow. They want to be able to charge. They want to give you the diagnosis, and
Great point. Right. It's not going to fit their game plan to lock people up and forcibly medicate them if they're refusing to take the medication and totally fine. So where's the problem? That would empty out the psychiatric hospitals and people would be going home to live out their life.
Right, and people get miraculously better on the day of discharge. So it's very, so it would be hard to say they miraculously got better if they did not give them the medication. So they want to say the medication is what they needed, and they took it. And but if you don't take the medication, miraculously you get better, and all of a sudden they have to let you go. Well, why were you so sick the day before, or that they had to keep you involuntarily?
Excuse me,
it's all fraud.
Can I add something?
It's all fraud.
Yes, go ahead, Crystal, please.
Oh, I was just going to say that they're obviously trying to give him the medication to make it look like he's schizophrenic, because it's a medication that apparently is for schizophrenia, but all the symptoms of schizophrenia overlap with the symptoms of directed energy weapon exposure. So this is and the
exactly
prescribing manual in both of them, and so it's almost the same picture of and this was written into the DSM decades ago. So if a person's already being targeted with those weapons, it's almost inescapable if they talk about it at all. And then by discrediting people as a group as well, then you can try to hide the fact that these weapons are being used. But I was going to say something else.
Yeah, you make a good point there, and if I can interject something, it kind of reminded me of a call I got actually just before we did this broadcast, and it was a really interesting call because it helped me quite a bit to hear from what you call TI. And for the people out there who are new to this, when we use the acronym TI, it stands for targeted individual. Now, this is an area that is very difficult to address and get into, and because it's difficult to prove often, where you can claim that you're getting hit with some kind of directed energy weapon, but how are you going to prove it? And talking to people who are unawake and unaware and uninvolved, and you're basically crack a beer, watch the game, kind of go around in your life in the lower mind, so to speak, and not look behind these doors and look underneath these unpleasant stones that we look under here with this group. It's hard to get through to them. So and it's frustrating for me because when I get calls from TIs, targeted individuals, people who may be experiencing these different type of psychological experiments that the military and the government is doing on Americans, legalized by the Straub-Thurmond National Defense Act of 1961. We know this is going on, but difficult to prove and difficult to help somebody who's going through this. What do you do when somebody says, I'm being gang stalked? Okay, I'm being hit with a directed energy weapon. Okay, well, what am I supposed to do about it? Well, I would love to help. I'm not denying that these things go on, but now what? And it sends people to a dead end. And I realized that I kind of developed a little bit of a game plan that I'd like to share. Ramola, if you would indulge me, maybe 5 minutes, I'm going to share a little bit
Definitely, but Crystal has something to say.
Can I add something first, please?
Sure.
Okay, I was going to say that, okay, so I lost my thought because I had this thought like 45 minutes ago. So I'm a little slow at trying to remember what I was going to say, but it was about, hold on a second. I was going to say that basically, sometimes when people are put in these situations of being targeted with the gang stalking or organized stalking and assaults with electromagnetic weapons, it's been precipitated by slander, which has placed somebody on a terrorism watch list. So part of what I wanted to point out is another avenue that may have another factor that might have something to do with people being thrown in the psych wards and their rights taken away is besides the Straub-Thurmond Act, which I don't know anything about. It was a court case in 2009 whereby there were 4 Guantanamo detainees who had been denied their religious rights and stuff like that over there. And a judge ruled that they didn't have a right, they didn't have any religious rights, and they didn't even qualify as persons. They didn't have personhood. So they tried to take it to the Supreme Court, and this case was called Rasool versus Rumsfeld. They tried to take it to the Supreme Court, but they refused. The Obama administration apparently supposedly put pressure on them not to hear the case. So the other ruling stood, and so now, but what the judge said was, if you're a suspected terrorist you can expect to be tortured. So, and the torturers
You're
are
fading out. Heidi, you got to stay with your phone and not fade out like you are. We're losing you.
That's not me. That's that's funny. I have no control. I have no control over that. It's some sort of
Oh, okay, that's not your fault. It sounded like you were stepping away from the microphone. What you were saying
because that happens frequently to people who are talking to me, but it's some sort of an technical interference. But basically, repeat what I was saying.
What you were saying is basically that the court ruled that if you're on the terrorist watch list, you have no rights and you're at the mercy of whatever the government wants to do to you.
Yeah, you're a non-person, and so then you can be tortured, and your torturers are immune.
Okay, well let me expand upon that and clarify that a little bit. That what the judge is not telling you is that it really has nothing to do with being on the terrorist watch list. He used that as a cover story. He doesn't want you to know that since 1933, when FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, declared the country in a state of emergency from the Great Depression, the country was broke. All the creditors from the Federal Reserve bankers were cashing in. They collateralized every person in this country and every piece of property in this country to the private bankers to cover the debt that from the stock market crash and the bankruptcy of the economy. And in that emergency of 33, so to speak, that's kind of what it's called, the emergency of 33 declared everyone in the country for future generations as well as, quote, enemies of the state. So what that judge was saying, well, if you're on the terrorist watch list, you're a non-person and we can do whatever we want to you. That applies to everybody in the country, right up to this day. So it led me to my frustration as a woman called me earlier tonight. She said, I'm a TI. They're following me from state to state and this and that. I was kind of frustrated. I said, I was trying to think kind of on the fly as what do we do to this? So here's what I told her, and I'll kind of just share it. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here because, I'm just trying to offer a solution to the TIs who are kind of frustrated because they're being persecuted, experimented on, hit with certain type of, weapons, if you want to call them that, or technologies that can affect your physical body and your state of mind. So my first thing was videotape everything. Your camera is your best friend. If you think somebody's following you, get a picture. Let me give you a little brief example of that. A woman in Kentucky who I've been working with lately, real tough woman. She's a fighter. She spent the night on the courthouse stairs for a couple of nights protesting the county taking her child. And she stood up to the sheriff. She stood up to the judge. Even her attorney is standing up to the judge. We found a good, decent attorney. And she caught a van following her. A white van. She pulled a U-turn. She chased the van down in her car. She got a picture of the side of the van, and it said Smart Pros. And when I went online and Googled Smart Pros, it turns out this is an outfit, a security outfit that hires military and police people. It's a private entity. It's not a government agency. It's a private corporation. They do surveillance. They do databasing. They do consultations. This is one of the private contractors that the government hires to surveil people, to stalk people, to follow people, to harass people, and there's no limit to what they can do because they're a private corporation, not bound by the same laws that the government agencies are, and they don't have to open up their books and show their funding and show what they're doing because they're a private corporation. Like the Vatican is a private country. And they don't have to show you their banking structure and how they own all the major corporations and the insurance companies and all the big blocks of stock along with the royal families of Europe. They don't have to show you that because they're private entities. The bankers of the Federal Reserve are private people. They remain anonymous. It's difficult to get all the way to the top and find out who they are. Smart Pros is a private company that does private gang stalking, private surveillance, private databasing, and then they sell that information to the FBI, the DHS, the CIA. So this is how the privatization of this is this scary thing. And so anyway, they've kind of interjected the word security. You have to type in Smart Security Pros because if you type in Smart Pro now, it comes up as some piece of technology in a car that they use for starting an engine or something like that. So they kind of buried their image. But I remember when she first told me about this outfit called Smart Pros and how these are the people who were stalking her. That it was really clear that 1 + 1 made 2. And this was not a stretch. This was not a coincidence that she just saw this man. And Smart Pros happens to be a surveillance company that privately does private surveillance against private citizens. And it had an introductory course and said, "Hi, we at Smart Pro here offer career opportunities to retired police and military personnel to do databasing, surveillance, and security operations for a wide range of governmental and private corporations." I mean, it went on and on and on. It was absolutely what it was. So Smart Pros. So there you go. Video everything. Get pictures of the people in the cars that are following you. Walk right up and take a picture of their license plate if it's suspicious. Now, look, if you don't be paranoid and take a picture of every car that happens to be, following you for a couple of blocks. That may be coincidence, but when it becomes clear that it's a pattern, video everything. So that's number one. The camera is your best friend. Number two, get out of the closet and get out into the public eye as much as possible. Start doing some activism. And I recommend picking one or two to start. If you can do more, great. Pick one or two issues that may be your passion or that you may be good at or know something about or that just strikes your fancy. I suggested to this woman, start passing out jury nullification flyers at the county courthouse. That one's a real, and I'll cut right to the reason for this is once you become like a public figure and you start doing activism on a larger scale and you have a friend go with you and start videotaping you doing that activism and you post it on YouTube and you make your own YouTube channel and you start doing a little blog every once in a while and you go down to your county legislature meeting once a month and you request a time slot to speak and you have your friend go with you with the camera and videotape you speaking at the county legislature. I've done it. And then you put that up on the internet and you start, all of a sudden you're out in the public eye. It's a great, it very dramatically diminishes and reduces the amount of stalking, following, surveillance, harassment, targeting. It's a big help. Trust me, I've seen it happen. So get activists, get out in the public, get out in the light. Go down to the park where people walk their dogs on Saturday morning and start passing out flyers, hand out DVDs. The two issues I recommended to this woman are, one is jury nullification, because I know the system is deathly afraid of jury nullification. I have it from a very highly ranked insider that the FBI sent a memo. And now it had no enforcement clause in it. It didn't say arrest them or go after them, but it said, be scared, beware. And they sent this to over 500 police departments nationwide that said, jury nullification is going to kill us. It's going to free the people from our tyranny. It's our Achilles heel. Watch out for jury nullification. It's the end of our scam. It's the end of these false incarcerations and the psychiatric ward lockups. If people start realizing jury nullification. It's what the colonists did in the 1700s to the British. The British would pass a law. You can't have guns. You can't do this. You have to let soldiers sleep in your house. You've got to give your buttons and any piece of your personal property to a British soldier if they want it. They got it. They're the god. You're the slave. And all these people in the 1700s, not guilty, not guilty. Every time a case would come in front of the court, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. They had to basically cease and desist passing any more laws because the colonists were hip to the scam and said, that's it. We're just going to find, unless there's clear evidence of somebody committed murder or something, which was very rare and still is, especially if you end the drug war, not guilty, not guilty. And jury nullification had a big part in freeing this country in the establishment of this republic and freeing us from the British rule. And so jury nullification is a big one. The government's deathly scared of jury nullification. They know the implications of jury nullification. And people can just go to courtroomwatch.com, and if you scroll down a ways, you'll see the blog headline, jury nullification flyer, download this, before they block it again. And they blocked it a whole bunch of times. They had to give up because we just kept reposting it. It got blocked when I was on Hagman and Hagman in front of 450,000 listeners. They did 404 error when everybody tried to find. So I had to read the thing over the air, and we just reposted it, and it became even more popular. So they had to kind of give up blocking it. They're definitely afraid of jury nullification. Pick that as your first issue. Download. It's in a PDF file, real easy to download. Make 100 copies. Then call your county courthouse and say, "Hi, what day is jury selection?" And they'll say, "Oh, that's Wednesday at Wednesday mornings at 9 o'clock." "Okay, what time do the doors open?" "Oh, the doors of the courthouse open at 8:30. "Oh, okay." So you get there at 8:15, and right before those doors open, there's going to be 100 people in line. Because even if there's just 2 cases that they're doing jury selection for, you're going to have 45 to 50 people in the jury pool, because some are going to get eliminated for each case. So even if it's a small county with just 2 cases, you're going to have 100 people there standing in line, ready for education. And you just walk down that line before the doors open. Don't block the door. Don't interfere with the court business. Just say, "Hi, here's some information on jury duty. Hi, would you like some information on jury duty? Just some historical information on being a juror." And you walk down, and everybody will take one. And guess what?
Hey, Eric, that's a great idea, but a lot of people may not know about it. So perhaps we should put some information out, and I'd be glad to post any links that you have on your website, perhaps
that would be great. Yeah. We're going to do, we'll get on that as soon as this podcast is over. I'll make sure that you have a PDF file of the jury nullification flyer. It's nothing fancy. It doesn't have big colors and bells and whistles and American flags all over. It's just a very simple 1 page that it describes what jury nullification is. It tells the people that if the judge starts giving jury instructions, that's jury tampering, and that's a felony. Do not listen to the judge. Mm-hmm. Don't let the judge intimidate you. Don't let the judge scare you. You have every right as a juror to say not guilty, even if that person who's on trial technically broke the law. If the law is wrong and there was no victim, this is another thing in the flyer, no victim, no crime. If you don't see a living man or a living woman who was injured by that person on trial, you have every right to say not guilty, even if they did commit a statutory infraction. Because most of the laws that we have now are geared to victimless crimes. Oh, you were possessing some weed. Oh, you drove too fast. You were driving with a suspended license. Oh, you had too much to drink, even though you only had 1 beer. They've lowered the threshold so much that you can gargle with Listerine mouthwash and blow over on the DWI meter now. That's how far they've lowered the standard. So don't give me this stuff. Well, we wouldn't want people driving drunk. Of course you don't want people driving drunk. But guess what's a bigger problem now than drunk drivers is out-of-control police and out-of-control courts. So no victim, no crime. Yeah, and so jury nullification, download the flyer. It's in a PDF. Make 100 copies. Pass them out everywhere. Put them on the bulletin boards at your grocery store. Put them on the telephone poles. Leave them on people's car windshield at a restaurant parking lot. Hand them out at the doggy park on Saturday or Sunday morning when everybody's down there running their pets. There's a gazillion. Think outside the box. Be creative, okay? So there's one. And the second issue I recommended to this woman, because I'm looking for solutions. What do you do for a TI? Someone who's a targeted individual and who's at the end of their rope, and they're getting bombarded with harassment, physical and personal. And what do you do? So I said the second issue, I would pick is smart meters.
Yes. Hey, Eric, we absolutely, unfortunately, have to cut this short because we have to close the show in pretty much a minute.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but these are great ideas, and we can discuss this at greater length another time. I'm just going to go around the table very briefly here and just ask anybody if they want to put out some last words. Remember, we are focusing in this case on, how Michael Lodge has finally gotten out of the hospital after a wrongful 302 hold, and what the state of affairs in this country today, whereby these 302 holds have been permitted to occur to such a great extent and in very wrongful circumstances. Most usually, I have not to this date heard of a 302 hold that was warranted. I've only heard about all the cases that were not warranted. So, if anybody has anything to add at this moment, please jump in. We are, we're going to have to close this broadcast and thank everybody for watching pretty soon.
Michael?
Yes, I have a question. What happens if I get another 302? Is it added to my?
No, it'll never happen. Since we put enough pressure on, I'm going to predict that it'll never happen. You may have other harassments, but I doubt it.
Okay, another one. Is it expungible?
I wouldn't waste your time. I'd do what I kind of said and get out as an activist and start picking some other issues that are not directly related to TI because you're going to scare people away. But get out and do jury nullification, smart meters, geoengineering, become an activist, be outspoken, and video everything.
Excuse me?
Okay, I have another question.
Oh, wait a second. One second. I think Crystal had something to say.
I just wanted to say it is expungible.
How do you go about expunging it? Is there a procedure?
I don't know, but I was reading up on it, and it's possible. I mean, I don't know if it's going to happen for him, but it's possible. There is a process.
It's possible.
Something to look into.
I say move on.
Okay, well, it is important to me because the day I got out, I was visited by 2 Upper Moreland Police Department. It was a detective, and I don't know if he was a sergeant, but they said they have a warrant to search my apartment. They asked me if I had a Glock revolver or whatever you say, a magazine. I said no. And I'm wondering, they kept on asking me over and over again. I said, no, I don't. And then they said, do you have any kind of gun in here? I said, yes, I have my father's police revolver. So they said,
in that circumstance, you want to file a motion to get your firearm back? Yes, I wouldn't worry about expungement. Worry about getting the gun back.
Okay. Well, let me finish. I said, they said if I don't, I said I have it locked up in my closet. So I gave them the keys to my apartment and to my closet where I have my dad's revolver. And they went in there and they took it, and they came back to the hospital and gave my keys back. And they said, due to I'm an inmate at the psych department, that this is standard, procedure. Mm-hmm. And I have to show to a psychiatrist that I'm not a danger to myself or to other people.
Very difficult to prove a negative.
Well, no. I went today. I had the VA assigned me, her name. Can I say her name?
No,
in Philadelphia.
They gave you a legal counsel. Great. In that case, since they got your gun and you got a free attorney, use it and try to get it back. Absolutely. In that case, I didn't know that part. Go ahead.
No, she's not a free attorney. She's a psychologist that I'm getting, due to my being schizophrenic, threat to society and everything. I have to get her to sign off to say that I'm not a threat to myself or to anybody else. And then I can get my dad's revolver back.
I would try it.
That's wonderful, Michael. So I had read up on this. When they commit somebody, they have 7 days to deliver a notice that they've been.
Yeah, it just goes to show people out there. It just goes to show that one of the main agendas behind this psychiatric incarceration is the disarmament of the American people.
Yeah, they
yes,
have
I believe that.
to get that notice to the local police department and to the sheriff's department over there in Pennsylvania, and
yeah, and and the court's going to have to make the ultimate decision, unfortunately, and they're not going to hear you most likely unless you have an attorney. You can try to self-represent, but once again, since they have your gun, yes, I would try it for sure. And but the court's going to make it very difficult. So I would try though, definitely. Do not let them keep your gun if you don't have to. It's going to require a motion in the court for the return of your guns. I saw a guy up here go through it. His wife called the cops on him because they were fighting. They took all his guns. It took him 2 years to get the guns back, and he had to have a lawyer do it. Unfortunately, I don't like to recommend attorneys, but the court presumes that they have power of attorney over you every time you appear in court. So if you don't have a lawyer with you, they pretend to not hear your motions, and it's very wrong. But I'm just warning you the obstacles you're going to go through when you encounter this event.
Yeah. Well, I didn't understand all that stuff. They started saying a year and all this. But in the end, they said that I have to get a psychiatrist to sign off to saying I'm not a threat to society.
Yep, and it's very difficult to prove a negative. To say I can prove that I'm not this. No, they're supposed to prove that you are that. So what you're going to have to do is make them prove that you are a threat to, and don't use the word society, because that's a fictitious entity that doesn't exist. You want to force them to prove that they have evidence that you're a danger to a living man or a living woman, because that's who makes up society.
And therefore, this thing that Crystal mentioned might actually be a great idea, the expungibility. You go after the expungibility so that they can't say, look, you had a 302 hold, you were considered a danger, because that's highly questionable. Why did they do the 302 hold in the first place?
Expunge, if I'm not mistaken, expunge means remove it from the record. That's not going to necessarily get his guns back. He has to prove a negative, which is he's not a threat, or make them prove a positive, which he is a threat. And that's what that is the burden of proof is on the state to prove you're guilty. The burden of proof should not be on you to prove you're innocent. That's a fundamental precept you want to go in if you're going to file your own motion. But be advised, it's going to take you time to get that gun back. But yeah, knowing that, I would definitely try. And expunging it is something you do at the very end to have the whole thing wiped off the record. And that's usually a little more difficult, but that's the last thing you're going to do. The first thing you're going to do is force them to prove that you're a danger, and otherwise they've got to give you that gun back.
Well, the only danger is the police, the FBI. They're a danger to me, so I'm not a danger to anybody. Never was, never will be.
Absolutely not.
Yep, include that argument in your paperwork.
But in the end, I am a danger to Representative Tom Mert of him getting reelected again.
No, you're not. No, you're not. I would not say you're a danger to him. I would say you're an asset to the community for exposing his corruption. Don't concede the fact that you're a danger to his career. That's in his opinion. You are an asset to us for exposing him. You are not a danger to him in any way, because if you start conceding that, you're going to play right into their hand.
Well, in reality, I'm not conceding anything. I'm just telling you, he called me up. He said, I'm killing him on Facebook.
That's his problem, and that's his opinion.
By exposing what he is.
Right, and that's good. And you can say, well, I'm not killing you, and I'm not hurting you. I'm helping the public by exposing your corruption. You put it to him that way, and you'll have the moral and legal high ground.
Yep. Well, he said he was going to get in touch with the DA. I believe it, because that's when the 302 popped up about a week later.
Yeah, that was who signed the 302.
Actually, I would recommend, Michael, very strongly that you call the police and you get a copy of that 302.
Yeah, I might stop there tomorrow, Ramola, because I want to know the...
We'd all love to see it. Just scan it and send it to us, will you, by email? We'd
you have to put it in writing, Mike. Don't just go down and ask them verbally. They'll pretend you didn't do it. You have to put it in writing. So make sure you have a written notice and a verbal notice, okay? Make sure you got a document that you've written up that makes that claim as well, okay? Because verbal alone doesn't cut it. Same with the court. Until you file that paper, they're just gonna brush you off.
Yeah.
You want to hear something? You want to hear something weird?
Sure.
All along, they told me, the Upper Moreland police told me I can come in and make a statement. Well, I went in there about 3 times to make a statement. That is what happened to me as a TI. And every time I came out, there was what do you call it? Upper Moreland police cruiser sitting out in the parking lot.
Oh, that's intimidation. That's par for the course. You know, once again, you're going to have.
Yeah.
And I'll go. Let me go fall back on what I said, and then I'll shut up. You got to videotape everything. When you go down there, they may not. They may resist having you pull out the camera during the one-on-one meeting or inside the chief's office. And I respect that. Turn it off. But when you're outside or something's going on in your driveway or out on the streets and public property, then you have every right to videotape everything, even if it's small stuff. Those things will help, because once you post it up on YouTube, you become more of a public figure and less of a target that they're going to want to deal with.
Yes, and also audio everything, audio record or video record.
Sure, yeah, audio. Both, yeah. Audio goes with, I was audio and visual, and like I said, pick a couple of issues that aren't directly TI related, like smart meters, geoengineering, and jury nullification, and start being an activist so you can get out into the public and be more interacting with people. You'll make friends. You'll be part of a bigger group. You'll have people on your side. You'll have some notoriety on the internet, and then you mark my words, all this TIing, all this targeting and this targeted individual stuff will diminish dramatically.
Well, I think that's a whole discussion on another day. We've got to close the show tonight. Unfortunately, thanks everybody for everything, all your contributions. And I'm going to ask the ladies, any last words?
I was just going to say together we can, try to streamline this better so we can get people out even faster. So
very good point.
I'm real excited about that.
Yes, and I suggest that we stay on an email list, with all of the people who contributed this time and took action and, gave ideas. Let's stay on a list and strategize and make sure we can continue to help anybody in the community who is facing this kind of situation.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ramola.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Eric. Crystal, any last words? Okay, we'll have to convene another time separately, Crystal. I know there's a lot you wanted to say that unfortunately we couldn't get to this time, but we will get to it eventually. Michael, thank you so much for coming on and sharing so much of your experience in the hospital with us. And we wish you all the best as you move forward and try to expand your record, get your dad's service revolver back, and, et cetera, everything that you are trying to do. And, Eric, thanks so much for joining me and with all of your great ideas and all of your information. Kim, thanks so much for all of the information that you brought to the table. Similarly, Crystal, thank you so much. Everybody who's watching, thanks so much, and we'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.